My name is Lieutenant Colonel Arya Blackwood, and this is the story of how I became the judge of my own family's fate. The face on the screen was haggard, a mask of desperation I knew all too well. It belonged to my father. Beside me, the air in the command center was thick with unspoken tension as my commanding officer, a grizzled two-star general, kept his voice low and serious. Major, the asset is compromised. The FBI is locked out. Protocol blackout is the only option, but the risk of total data loss to the civilian entity is significant. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine for any hint of hesitation. It is your call, sign on the operation, your decision. I looked back at the screen at the man who had broken me, and a cold crystalline calm washed over me. I gave a single sharp nod. Authorize it, General. But just 24 hours earlier, the world had been painfully bright, and I was the one who was compromised. It was Father's Day and I was standing in a sunny suburban backyard that felt more like hostile territory than home. I had driven 3 hours from my base at Fort Cameron, a familiar foolish hope warring with an even more familiar dread. There was my father, Marcus, a retired Army colonel who viewed the world through the narrow lens of his own infantry past, a past he believed I had failed to honor. And there, basking in his glow, was my brother Damien, the family's golden boy, who ran the multi-million-dollar construction firm our father saw as his true legacy. My father raised his glass, his voice booming with pride, to my son Damien for building a real-world legacy with his own 2 hands. The small crowd of family friends applauded dutifully. Then his eyes landed on me and his smile tightened into a smirk. And Arya is here, he announced, the dismissive chuckle twisting something in my gut. Good to see you taking a break from your little computer games at that desk job. The quiet titters from the guests were like echoes from my childhood. The same sound that followed every time my academic awards were brushed aside for Damien's sports trophies. It was the cold, familiar sound of my own internal ledger. Another debt of dignity logged in silence. A few minutes later, he cornered me by the grill, his shadow falling over me like a judgment. His voice was low, meant only for me, and it was sharper than any parade ground command. You know, seeing you in that uniform playing soldier, it is just a reminder of what you are not. He stared at the house his son had renovated, not at the daughter standing before him. This is a day for fathers and their legacies. I do not think you are welcome here today. It is for the best. He did not yell. He did not have to. The quiet dismissal was worse. I just nodded, got in my car, and returned to base. He had no idea that by banning me from Father's Day, he had just put the fate of his entire legacy into the hands of the one person he considered a complete failure. To understand the call I had to make the next day, you have to understand the 2 worlds I was living in. My family operated on 2 very different sets of rules. One for my brother and one for me. This was never clearer than last Christmas. I remember the scent of pine and cinnamon filling the air as Damien presented our father with a large framed photograph of a new office building his company had just completed. My father, a man I had seen cry maybe twice in my life, had tears in his eyes. He held the frame like it was a holy relic, his voice thick with emotion as he called it a monument to the Blackwood name. The pride in that room was a physical thing, so heavy I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of it. It was a perfect polished moment of a father seeing his legacy confirmed in his son. Later that evening, when the excitement had died down, I tried to share my own news. I found my father by the fireplace nursing a glass of bourbon. I told him I had been awarded the Defense Meritorious Service Medal. I explained in simple terms that my team and I had stopped a major cyber attack on the nation's power grid, preventing what could have been a catastrophe. He just patted my hand, his eyes already gazing back at the picture of Damien's building over the mantel. That is nice, sweetie, he said, the words utterly dismissive. Does that come with a raise? That was when he first used the nickname, a little joke he thought was clever. He called me Major Misfire, because in his eyes I had missed the mark on having a real Army career like the one he had in the infantry. I had not carried a rifle. I carried a security clearance. Therefore, I was a disappointment. It was my mother, Isabella, a woman who treated family peace like a fragile antique that must be preserved at all costs, who found me later. She pulled me into the kitchen, her expression a familiar mix of sympathy and apology. "You know how your father is," she whispered as if that explained everything. "His pride is all tied up in the company. Damien's job is so much more tangible. It is something he can see. He needs the encouragement." I just nodded. What she meant was that Damien's legacy was the one that mattered, and my role was to not get in the way of his light. The internal ledger clicked over once more. Her words just another entry alongside 1,000 other moments where I was told to be smaller, to be quieter, to understand. That was one world. The other was my reality. In my other world, I was not Major Misfire. I was Oracle. That is the only name my team used for me inside the SCIF, the Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility at Fort Cameron. It is a world without windows, bathed in the sterile blue glow of monitors, where the only sound is the quiet hum of servers and the frantic but controlled clicking of keyboards. There I did not feel small. I stood before a massive screen displaying a web of global network traffic, a digital battlefield where I was a commander. "We have a polymorphic threat bypassing their firewall," I would say, my voice calm and absolute. "I need a full SIGINT workup on the originating server. Execute kill chain protocol on my mark." My team, a group of the sharpest cyber warfare specialists in the country, would move without question. They trusted my analysis and my instincts. In that room, my judgment was not questioned. It was relied upon. My commanding officer, General Harrison, a man who saw soldiers not by their branch, but by their effectiveness, once watched my team neutralize a hostile state actor attempting to infiltrate the Pentagon's network. He did not say much afterward, just gave me a curt nod. "Good work, Oracle," he had said. From him, that was the highest praise imaginable. It was a respect I never had to ask for. It was simply earned. In that world, I was not a footnote in someone else's story. I was the one protecting the entire damn book. For years, I had tried to speak their language of emotion and tradition, but their language had only one currency: visible, undeniable power. After Father's Day, I stopped trying to translate my life for them. The world was about to provide a translation they could not ignore. The morning after Father's Day, I was back in my world, a world of encrypted signals and silent digital battlefields. The emotional chaos of my family felt a million miles away, and I welcomed the sterile focus of my work. I was at my workstation when a red banner flashed across my screen. It was a Tier 1 alert, the highest priority. I leaned in, my coffee forgotten as I scanned the initial report. A sophisticated zero-day ransomware virus had completely crippled a major East Coast construction firm, locking them out of every server, every file, every system. My eyes traced down the document to the name of the compromised asset, Blackwood Construction. A strange stillness settled over me. It was not triumph. Not yet. It was something colder, clearer. It was the feeling of a chaotic emotional equation, suddenly simplifying into a single elegant proof. While I stared at the screen, my phone set to silent on my desk began to vibrate violently. It buzzed and skittered across the surface, a frantic, desperate dance. I glanced at the screen. 88 missed calls, all from my father and Damien. I watched it vibrate one more time, then reached over and held the power button until the screen went black. This is not revenge, I thought to myself. This is protocol. As the day wore on, the situation escalated exactly as I knew it would. The ransomware was a new, highly advanced strain that the FBI's cyber division could not crack. Per federal guidelines, when a cyber attack on critical private infrastructure shows the signature of a hostile state actor, the case is formally escalated. Jurisdiction is transferred from federal law enforcement to the Department of Defense, specifically to U.S. Cyber Command. The official request landed by the pure, beautiful, and impersonal logic of the system, directly on the desk of the lead analyst for that particular threat group. It landed on my desk. Late that afternoon, General Harrison walked into my office without knocking, a tablet in his hand. He looked at me, his expression entirely unreadable. "Major," he began, his voice a low gravel. "The FBI has formally requested our intervention in the Blackwood construction attack. I know the name." He paused, letting the weight of the words hang in the air. "This puts you in a compromised position. It also makes you the single most qualified officer in this entire command to handle this. The mission takes precedence. I am officially assigning you as operational lead. Your call sign, Oracle, is now in command of the response. The 88 missed calls were not apologies. They were panicked demands for the IT girl in the family. They had no idea. They had just become a case file. A case file that was now sitting on my desk, waiting for my command decision. The secure video teleconference connected with a soft digital chime. On the main screen in front of me, the glass-walled boardroom of Blackwood Construction swam into view. It was a scene of utter disarray. My brother Damien, who always prided himself on his impeccable appearance, was slumped in a chair, his tie loosened and his face pale. And my father, Marcus, looked smaller than I had ever seen him. A ghost haunting the throne of his own collapsed kingdom. They were flanked by a grim-faced FBI liaison, and they all looked at the camera with a desperate, pleading hope. They thought they were about to be rescued. They had no idea they were about to be judged. I remained just out of my camera's view, watching from the shadows of the SCIF as General Harrison took his seat. The formal seal of U.S. Cyber Command was positioned perfectly behind him, a symbol of absolute authority. The FBI agent cleared his throat, his voice tinny through our speakers. "Mr. Blackwood," he began. "As we explained, the complexity of this attack is beyond our domestic resources. We have formally transferred authority over this incident to the Department of Defense." The agent gestured toward the screen. "You are now under their jurisdiction." My father straightened up, a flicker of his old pompous self returning. He was trying to project importance, to meet power with power. General Harrison's voice then boomed from the speakers, a force of nature that instantly crushed my father's fragile posturing. "Mr. Blackwood, I am General Harrison, commander of Task Force Chimera. Your company has been targeted by a hostile state actor. This is no longer a private business matter." The general paused, letting the words sink in. "This is now a matter of national security." My father, ever the retired colonel trying to find his footing with a superior officer, nodded eagerly. "Whatever it takes, General," he said, his voice straining to sound cooperative and strong. "My company and all its resources are at your service." At his service. The irony was so thick I could taste it. His resources were a burning ruin, and he was a civilian completely out of his depth. He had no idea what service was truly being rendered, or by whom. General Harrison held my father's gaze for a long moment before delivering the final decisive blow. "Your point of contact and the operational commander for this response is our lead analyst for this entire threat sector," he stated, his tone flat and procedural. "She is the foremost expert on this particular hostile group. I will turn the brief over to her now." He gestured to his side, to the empty space beside him. This was it. Every dismissive comment, every condescending pat on the head, every time I was made to feel like a footnote in my own family, it all led to this single quiet step. I moved from the shadows and into the light of the camera, my crisp class A uniform immaculate, my major's insignia gleaming under the sterile lights of the command center. I seated myself, my posture perfect, and stared directly into the camera lens, directly at them. The change was instantaneous and total. Damien's jaw literally dropped. He looked as if he had seen a ghost rise from the grave. But my father, his reaction was a sight I would store in my memory forever. The forced bravado on his face did not just fade, it shattered. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy gray pallor. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The man who had a lecture for every occasion, who had never once been at a loss for words to put me in my place, was utterly and completely silent. He was staring at his daughter. He was seeing a major in the United States Army. He was seeing his own colossal life-altering mistake. I let the silence stretch, a quiet assertion of the new reality. Then I spoke. My voice was devoid of emotion. The voice I used for tactical briefings, not for family. "Mr. Blackwood," I said, the formal address landing like a physical strike. "I am Major Aria Blackwood. My call sign for this operation is Oracle." I saw him flinch at the name. His major misfire was gone. In her place was an Oracle. "My team has isolated the malware. We have one tactical option, a counter-protocol codenamed Blackout." I paused, making sure they understood the gravity of what came next. There is a 60% chance it will neutralize the threat and restore your core systems. There is a 40% chance it will trigger the malware's anti-tampering defenses and irrevocably wipe your company's entire digital infrastructure. I leaned forward slightly. The legacy you have spent a lifetime building will either be saved or erased in the next 5 minutes. We require your formal authorization to proceed. My father, the colonel, had spent my entire life lecturing me about the chain of command. In that moment, staring at me through a secure government feed, he finally truly understood it. My father's voice came through the speakers as a faint broken whisper. Authorize it. That was all he had left. All the bluster, all the lectures, all the years of towering authority, reduced to 2 words of complete and total surrender. I did not look at his face on the screen. I did not need to. I had already seen everything. I turned my head slightly toward my team, who were poised and ready, waiting for the final word. My word. I gave them a curt single nod. Execute protocol blackout, I said, my voice steady and clear. Then I stood up. I did not wait to see if the protocol worked. If the blinking cursors on the screen would signal salvation or ruin. That was a technical outcome. My war was already over. I turned my back on the monitor, on the ghost in the boardroom, and walked out of the SCIF, the heavy soundproof door clicking shut behind me. The professional duty was done. The personal connection, or what was left of it, had been severed by protocol. 6 months later, I stood on a polished stage at Fort Cameron, the auditorium filled with officers in their dress uniforms. The air was thick with the scent of floor wax and the quiet dignity of military tradition. I felt a gentle weight settle on my shoulders as General Harrison carefully pinned the silver oak leaves of a lieutenant colonel onto my uniform. He leaned in close, his voice a low rumble meant only for me, the scent of his starched collar sharp and clean. Colonel Blackwood, he said, the new title feeling both strange and perfectly right. Your detached professional handling of the Blackwood construction incident is already being used as a case study at the War College. You defined what it means to put the mission first. He stepped back and looked me in the eye, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. Congratulations, Oracle. After the ceremony, there was no awkward family gathering. There was no strange silence or forced conversation. Instead, I was surrounded. My team, my real family, pulled me into a loud, joyful huddle. They clapped me on the back, their laughter echoing in the hall. They did not see a disappointment or a misfire. They saw their commander. They saw their colleague. They saw Oracle. This was a celebration not of my name, but of my work. This was a family forged not by blood and obligation, but by mutual respect and shared competence in the face of immense pressure. This, I realized, was what it felt like to be truly welcome. This was where I belonged. A few weeks later, I was in my new office, larger with a window that overlooked the sprawling complex grid of Fort Cameron. It was my domain. I was reviewing after-action reports when an email notification popped up on my screen. The sender was simply Marcus Blackwood. The subject line hit me with a jolt of irony that was almost painful. Father's Day. For a long moment, I just stared at it. A relic from another lifetime. My finger hovered over the delete key, but curiosity, or perhaps the need for a final definitive closure, made me click it open. The message was short. Just 2 sentences. It is next week. I would be honored if you would be welcome. I read the words over and over. Honored. Welcome. The 2 things I had spent my entire youth craving from him, now offered up in a quiet digital plea. There was no anger left in me. There was not even any triumph. There was just a vast calm stillness like the quiet that follows a storm. I saw him not as a monster, but as a small, sad man who had finally learned a language he was no longer entitled to speak with me. I moved my mouse, highlighted the message, and with a single deliberate click moved it to the archive folder. It was not deleted. It was just a part of a history I no longer needed to revisit. I swiveled my chair and looked out the window at the world I had built for myself. My peace was no longer a negotiation. It was a fact. My father finally learned how to welcome me. But by then, I had already built a world where I did not need his invitation. A legacy is not something you are given. It is the authority you earn when no one is watching. If you have ever had to build your own table because you were not welcome at someone else's, Share your story below. In this community, your expertise is always welcome. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that your worth isn't determined by those who can't see your value, please subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell because we share powerful stories of triumph, resilience, and finding your true family every week. Your story matters, your journey matters, and we're here to remind you that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply becoming who you were meant to be. Subscribe now and join our community of survivors who refuse to let others define their worth.